Today we take a look at England's pride pork, the hog heralded by royalty and fine dining establishments, the pasture pig for homesteaders, and one of the most economical choices for a heritage breed that anyone could hope to find. The Gloucester spotted pig has looked down the barrel of extinction more than once, but its quality pork, gentle temperament, and the many champions that have stood behind the Old Spot's comeback are why they've been able to beat the odds every time. So get your wellies on and let's jump right in. The Gloucester spotted pig originates from England, and since traditional British names are a bit of a tongue-tier, and our friends across the pond can get understandably vexed with mispronunciations of their historical breeds and sites, we'll stick to the more common terms for our subject today to save ourselves the embarrassment. The spotted pig, or Gloucester spot, or sometimes just called spotties, has probably been around for centuries. But Europeans always saw pigs as a pheasants animal, so they didn't bother to register any swine breeds until the 1900s. And by then, the spotty had been around for so long that there were thousands of them spread across Britain. They were probably developed from the old Berkshire and the old Gloucester pigs. Both of these breeds are now extinct. Berkshire still has plenty of offshoot breeds that sprung from it, still around today, since they were usually used as a baseline breed because of their hardiness and their good meat production. The old Gloucesters, on the other hand, were a little bigger and had much more lard. There are probably a few other breeds in the mix too, but swines weren't nearly as valued as other livestock and therefore not as closely monitored. So unfortunately, we'll never be completely sure of the first few hundred years of their genetic history. The result was a pig that grew to the higher end of medium. They had the underlining white coat from the original Old Spots, with some of the dark colouring from its Berkshire side in its black spots. Even though they are leaner pork like the Berkshires, they still have the potential to build up a good chunk of lard like the original Gloucester Old Spots had if they are not allowed to forage as they should. In 1913, the British Board of Agriculture finally accepted the Gloucester Old Spots Breed Society's request to put the breed on the roster, and with that, Old Spotty became the first ever pig to be recognised in the books. By then, the pheasant's pig was already spread far and wide, and they were a very prolific breed in the United States in particular. They reached their highest numbers around the First World War. They provided a lean cut that could be reared quickly, bred fast, and served the dual purpose of giving high-quality meat as well as clearing farmland and feeding on orchard scraps that would otherwise have been wasted. Economical and mild-mannered, Old Spots became the most populous pig in Britain and the United States for a little while. But just 30 short years later, they went from the most popular pig in the pasture to a forgotten forager that only managed to hang on for dear life on a handful of farmsteads in the background. Like so many of the heritage breeds we cover, it's all because of the industrial era. High-yield production had already been steadily picking up pace since the 1910s, but the end of the Second World War sent the race for high-yield production into overdrive. We needed animals that could grow quickly, that could produce more, and live off less. The Old Spots just weren't made to be raised indoors, so they naturally fell out of favor when there were other, faster-growing pigs that could be raised indoors out there to replace them with. But finally, 20 years after the big war, the British breeding societies came together to redo all of the rosters and to do a long overdue tally of the various animals' populations and where they managed to travel after so many years of being left unchecked. They were horrified at the results. Most of the historical and sometimes ancient breeds were in dire need of help, and for some, it was already too late. They couldn't possibly take on thousands of breeds on their own, so they took each breed, allocated their preservation to the country or region of their origin, and focused on the ones that originated in the British Isles. And the spotties were one of their top priorities to save. Not only were the spots as English as the Union Jack drenched in tea, they also held the title of the first pig to be on any official European register. At once, they set down a few herds across Europe with the intention of swapping out boars to keep numbers growing without heavy inbreeding. But getting their numbers up from the meager few hundred proved to be a difficult task because, outside of England, farmers weren't sticking to the breeding programs set in place. They were breeding the hardy spots with other pigs to improve their own pigs' meat quality, size, and docility. In 1995, they were right back where they started. Pure Old Spots were once again below 1,000 breeding quality sows, and that gave them the status of a critically endangered breed all over again. So a woman called Robin Metcalf decided to take a few to the USA, and in the States, where there was more interest from small-scale farmers who had the space and need for foraging animals and a genuine interest in preserving endangered animals. It didn't take long for Old Spots to climb in popularity, and since then, they've become known as some of the best homestead hogs around today. Old Spots are technically medium pigs, but only just. They usually reach weights between 200 and 300 kilograms, with boars being on the higher end of the scale. But some boars can reach 400 kilograms if they're fed on just grains. That weight is enough to push them into the heavyweight category. Their short snouts are a good indicator of their foraging nature. They were once called orchard cleaners because they were sent in to feast on the waste and skins that came from the orchards after the harvest season was over. They forage just as well as any other open-field pig, but they are bigger than other foragers. The English told stories of how the spotties got their spots from apples falling on their backs when they were rooting in the orchards. Kitchen scraps, grasses, shallow roots, grains, and garden waste. They aren't picky at all, making them a very economical choice for the farm. According to breeding guidelines, their forward-facing floppy ears must reach the tip of their noses, and there should be ample space between the ears on their heads. And like their name implies, old spots must have at least one clearly defined black spot on their white coat to be considered pure. Sows typically give birth to 8 to a dozen piglets at a time. She'll start at 6 to 8 piglets with her first farrowing and gradually build up in number as she reaches her prime. Boars slaughter at weights starting at 250 kilograms and can go as high as 300 if they're left to grow out a little longer. And when it comes to their meat, they are currently some of the highest quality pork on the market you can find, even being the preferred pork by the British royal family, and Michelin-starred restaurants are willing to pay a pretty penny to get their hands on the pork. Old spots produce a leaner cut, but they have just enough fat on them for good bacon. Balanced, delectable, and versatile, homesteaders across America are dining on the same quality pork that the royal family are. Old spots are renowned for their lazy and gentle temperaments and their good parenting instincts. These qualities are exactly why there were such headaches over indiscriminate breeding practices. Even large factory farms tried breeding those natural instincts back into hybrid pigs, further decimating the pure old spot populations. We cannot stress enough how calm these hogs are. If they have a little room, some wallow space, and enough to keep their jaws moving, spotties won't even bother to test the fencing that's around them. This makes the process of separating mothers that are about to farrow or moving butchering stock away from others so much less chaotic than pigs usually are in these times. The quality of their meat is exceptional. They offer just enough fat to get a good amount of lard from, but just enough to keep their meat lean and juicy without becoming overly fatty and oily. The average family will get enough lard for themselves and maybe even a little extra for trade. This lard-to-meat ratio gives them the ability to serve multiple purposes, producing pork, lard, and bacon. Sows mother their young exceptionally well, and they don't have a problem giving birth out in the open field if they have to. Obviously, it's advised to separate sows that are ready to farrow in their own safe enclosures, since other pigs could trample the piglets, and they would be vulnerable to predators. And mothers will also fiercely protect their newborn babies, and they won't hesitate to attack other pigs or humans that they aren't familiar with. But it's their foraging capabilities that make them so attractive to homesteads. The costs of keeping up with feeding a big animal like a pig can really chip away at the budget. But spotties will make up most of their diet from the pastures you set them out on, and they like the opportunity to get some space between their penmates. All pigs are very social animals, and though the old spots like company well enough, they appreciate doing their own thing every now and then, and they don't need the constant comfort of company at all times. This means that you can keep a few less if you're pressed for space without them getting too lonely, and it's probably also why you'll rarely see any fighting amongst them. They don't mind cold weather, and with a little extra infrastructure when it snows, they'll be just fine outside. And in the hotter months, they will need some wet wallow space like other pigs do. Old spots are a pasture pig down to every fiber of their being. Their calm disposition might trick you into thinking that they won't mind being indoors, but you would be very, very wrong. That's about the only time that you'll see any aggression from these hogs, and the last thing you want is an angry and frustrated animal of this size on your hands. If they're too cramped up, sows will stop going into heat, and the stress will make them more susceptible to disease than ever. When you keep them on pasture, like they should be, it comes with its own set of circumstances to take into consideration. Besides the obvious danger of predator attacks, there is the real possibility that a parasite, foot and mouth disease, or swine vesicular disease can wipe out entire herds. Yes, they are classified as hardy and disease-resistant, but that doesn't make them completely immune to disease. So treat them regularly for the parasites in your area, and feeding them a varied diet with plenty of forage is going to go a long way toward keeping your herd healthy and thriving. And now we come to the foraging aspect. They need space and plenty of it. They can clear out a patch of land in no time. You need to rotate their fencing at regular intervals to give the natural grasses and weeds a chance to bounce back before your pigs come around again to clear the growth out. They're so good at foraging that you'll need to sow some indigenous plants and fresh ground cover every time you move them from their old pasture. Otherwise, that forage isn't going to come back back fast enough for them to feed on in the next round. And when it comes to what they eat, just because they are foragers doesn't mean that's all they'll be eating. You still need to substitute at least 40% of their diets yourself. They aren't picky about what they eat, just as long as you avoid meat products. Be careful not to feed them too many grains, because it is going to destroy the quality of their meat. They just put on too much fat from it. They really shouldn't be having more than 20% grains in their diets, but that 20% is also absolutely necessary. It will provide them with the protein and iron they aren't getting enough of on the land. You don't need to apply any serious math to get the ratios just right. Just keep a watchful eye on your herd. If your boars start to develop waddles beneath their chins, they're getting too many grains. Too little, and you'll notice their health and weight decline over time. And you can simply add a ration of at least 16% protein grains to the feeding trough for every pig in your herd when you feed them in the morning and evening. Old spots aren't going to drop dead in the desert heat or Alaskan colds, but they just won't be as happy or healthy when you push their boundaries out of the norm. And the infrastructure you'll need to keep them protected is going to keep them away from their natural need to feed out in the open. Raising pasture pigs is going to give you a superior quality product, and on the whole, their temperaments are just so much gentler than other breeds. But you need to keep your space, their rotation, and their nutritional needs in mind. If you don't plan accordingly, you run the risk of losing your entire herd to disease or neglect. But they bring with them the ideal temperament, low cost, a great product, and generally such a well-rounded land hog that there aren't many pasture pigs out there that can compare to the Gloucester Old Spot Pig. They are truly the ultimate homestead pig, and with their steady rise in popularity and the community's dedication to bringing back the old spots, they are quickly rising up the ranks with no signs of stopping anytime soon. So now we need to ask you, the viewers, are you ready to spend like a pauper so that you too can dine like a king? If that's the case, maybe it's time to look into the proud, docile and delicious Gloucester Old Spot Pig for your farm. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe and share with as many farming enthusiasts as you can, or have a look at some of our other videos on your screen right now. Until next time, bye.